The modern format, in just a couple of months, has seen its power dynamics change considerably since Pro Tour Edge of Eternities. In this video, we will go over those changes for specific decks and what new tools they may bring to the table. Including Pro Tour Edge of Eternities, we've now had 3 major tournaments featuring the modern format. With this, the landscape of the format has seen some major pendulum swings towards what decks people want to play. The format is diverse, giving the player multiple decks to choose from that could fit their playstyle. In a previous video, I've gone over a large number of these lists before the Pro Tour. But with how fast the format is moving, it was time to do another look-in at where decks are in the format. Deck lists and timestamps will be in the description of the video, so let us get started. Probably the biggest change in the modern format has been the adjustment of Blink decks. While both Esper and Orzhov still exist and put up results, Jeskai has had a breakout performance at RC Houston in October of 2025. They put 9 copies in the top 64, including 2 in the top 8, with Vinny Fino's list taking down the tournament. In a lot of ways, Jeskai Blink is really just a slightly modified list from last year that popped up soon after Modern Horizons 3 was released. At that point, the list was running Nulldrifter and Phlage as the 2 main targets to blink or scam into play to draw cards/helix opponents. Granted, the list at that time was more focused on being a control list playing invert polarity and even dress down. Today's version is still running Phlage, as it is still one of the best creatures in the format. Ragavan is seen here as a good threat that can be protected while making mana to help facilitate that protection. Starting at the Pro Tour, everyone has been trying to play this card, and it is featured here as well, Quantum Riddler. Riddler is a large flying threat that draws cards, and when warped early, sits in the warp zone threatening the opponent. It also is less of a control deck and more of a tempo deck. Phlage and Riddler are your 2 main targets to scam in, with your third being Solitude as some removal. With Ephemerate, Consign, and Phalia, you have multiple ways to keep these threats on the board early. There isn't a current consensus on what version of Broodscale is the best. While Gruul is still a strong list, we are starting to see a rise in 2 other lists that are doing well. One of these lists would be Golgari. Not the Golgari list we saw before the Pro Tour that splashed to play Sephiroth, but now former Yawgmoth players have added their spin on the list by jamming the Broodscale Combo in with Youngwolf and Yawgmoth, Thran Physician. This is shown to be a pretty effective way to grind out games and also have an instant win combo. The other list that has shown some promise is more of a big mono green list. This is a little deceiving as you're still playing Grove of the Burn Willows, as it is still the best colorless green and red source that you can play. But here you get to play Ugin's Labyrinth. 8/7 plus CMC sources isn't perfect, but the inclusion of Devourer Destiny here as a way to help sculpt your hands and also to be a removal spell is pretty powerful. Some lists will still play a copy or 2 of Tezzeret to help find hate pieces to delay your opponent or to find your Blade of the Blood Chief. Of course, playing a bigger mana build lets you play the 3rd copy of Emrakul the Promised End, which in some ways helps you find this particular win con more often than the other builds did. Though all builds of the list have adopted the Emrakul plan in some number due to it being such a major win condition, and that the deck plays a number of different card types that can easily end up in the graveyard, thanks to Malevolent Rumble, Kozilek's Command, and Urza's Saga. There should also be a mention of some builds that have been utilizing Edge of Eternity's standout, Icetill Explorer. Of course, this card lets you mill more things into the graveyard with each land you play, which feeds Emrakul the Promised End, and lets you have a Ghost Quarter plan to be able to take out your opponent's mana. Eldrazi Ramp has had a weird timeline. In some ways, it's the fair Eldrazi deck. Sorry to my friends who still play Eldrazi aggro. Rest in peace. Gone are the days of early 2025 when it was widely considered to be the 2nd best deck in the format until Underworld Breach decks made the format shift away from Ramp as a top of the meta play. Eldrazi Tron was the preferred deck at the Pro Tour. Broodscale Combo has been the breakout Eldrazi list of the year, and Eldrazi Ramp in some cases has just been left at the altar. For a while we had some grinders, such as Glitspire. I will link their channel in the description as they are good people and have done a ton of work in terms of grinding out advantages and disadvantages in the Eldrazi deck lists overall. On the prospects of Heragast, as an explosive way to win games for the Ramp shell. This worked for a while, and the list even got some shine on camera a time or two at the Pro Tour. Most recently, the deck has adopted a heavier mana denial strategy that has been championed by Aspiring Spike and Glitzspire that utilizes Icetill Explorer. The land ETB effect that Icetill has of milling a card feeds Emrakul the Promise End, and also lets you consider playing Unholy Heat as a less painful way to deal with opposing threats compared to Dismember. The key card to go with Icetill here, though, is the recent inclusion of Ghost Quarters. Ramp Shell can get Icetill out as early as turn 2, with either a turn 1 play of Forest and Utopia Sprawl into Uggin's Lab, or just play in Uggin's Lab into Talismanic Curiosity on turn 1, into a second green source on turn 2, into Icetill Explorer. Then if you have Ghost Quarter as your second land for turn after landing the Icetill, you can start to systematically pick off the opponent's lands, and eventually more modern decks will run out of basics pretty quickly. This makes their time frame to respond as maybe 2 to 3 turns at most, depending on what is in their hand and how many basics they may be running. The funny thing here is, this mana denial plan still almost seems too fair for the meta, as most decks are wanting to beat you on turns 2 through 4, and at times the ramp plan feels a step slow in comparison. That being said, your most explosive hands are still going to win plenty of games, and being able to play cards such as Ugin Eye of the Storms and Sire of Seven Deaths will close most games out. Domain Zoo found an answer to its Fable of the Mirrorbreaker problem. I know, calling Fable a problem in a way that isn't "please ban this card out of your format" seems wild in 2025 after everything it had done in Standard and Pioneer. Pours one out for Pioneer. It is the truth though, as Domain has seen an uptick in play since every deck builder in Modern after the Pro Tour thought, should this deck play Quantum Riddler? Turns out, the answer a lot of the time is yes. Though some lists have actually backed away here in the latter part of October 2025 from Riddler to play Nulldrifter instead or Winternight Stories, which plays more favorably with Doorkeeper Thrall, in that though you may not draw cards through the Thrall Evoke interaction, you'll get to keep another flying 4/4 threat, and compared to Riddler, you get Annihilator 1, which when used with Arena of Glory early in the game, provides more than just a run-on sentence. It provides a trigger that on turn 3 makes the opponent have to think through what the removal will be used on, and how many of these triggers they can take before dealing with the issue. Add the fact that this list already has a very competitive shell that decks can have a difficult time dealing with in the Leyline of the Guildpact Scion of Draco hands, and you have a list that can win a challenge or your Modern Monday pretty easily. While Standard has been plagued by the card in VV decks, it is interesting seeing Domain adopt a single copy of Winternight Stories at times. The deck can harmonize the card easily, and this helps replace once again Fable of the Mirrorbreaker. Affinity really broke out as one of the best decks in the format at Pro Tour Edge of Eternities, and has fully adopted the weapons manufacturing plan in some form or fashion. It has been taking full advantage of Pinnacle Emissary, casting multiple 0-mana artifacts after casting either of these cards drastically increases the number of artifacts on the battlefield, which then leads to your main finisher, Kappa Cannoneer. This can even be done as early as turn 1, which is kind of bonkers. Of course, the deck still takes advantage of Urza's Saga and the unbanning of Mox Opal. The favorite way of the deck to blow up munitions tokens is Engineered Explosives, which can also double as a sweeper/removal spell in the energy matchups. But here it is mostly for being a 0-mana artifact that can then be blown up. Claws of Gix has shown itself to be a great fetchable sack outlet for Urza's Saga to nab, and as another way to outgrind your opponent. We have even had a few locals in our meta try running Old Scales and Affinity All-Star Arcbound Ravager as a neat sack outlet that can scale to be a difficult threat. Thanks to its resiliency and raw efficiency, Affinity has been a recurring presence at the top tables, with multiple copies showing up in nearly every regional championship's top finishes in Modern since the Pro Tour. Moving forward, I think which sack outlets are run will be pretty meta dependent, but if one thing's for certain, this deck is here to stay as long as Mox Opal is still in the format. Amulet Titan is the best deck in the format. I'm only going to touch on it here because I believe I did a decent job going over it in the past video, And nothing new other than dabbling with Icetill Explorer has happened to this deck of note in terms of construction. RC Houston showed how when enough decent Titan players show up, that it can have an incredible day 2 conversion rate. It even put 11 copies in the top 32 of that tournament, with a top 8 performance and one list that just missed top 8. The deck is difficult to interact with and difficult to play. This may lead to some players feeling like the list may need something banned from it, but I actually believe the deck is in a good spot. When enough graveyard hate hits the format, or the format adjusts to play more Pithing Needle Flute effects, the deck can stumble a bit. Plus, it's easier to tell when you are dead than a KCI situation. So for now, I think it's safe to stay. Goryos was the most played deck at Pro Tour Edge of Eternities. It has since shown that it is still in a great spot consistently being at around 9% of the meta. At RC Houston, it had a little bit of a rough weekend however, only converting 17 deck lists to day 2 of the 108 registered on day 1 of the tournament. It is hard to deny the power level of this deck however. When you have a field that doesn't register enough graveyard hate, Goryos can really take advantage of getting Griselbrand and Atraxa into play early to then sculpt their hand for answers to your plan. The adoption of Quantum Riddler into this deck has been a powerful one, as it can be tossed for Force of Negation when need be, and drawn late can get you back in the game with drawing a couple of cards. One thing I will say is look at this graphic. As you can see, it has a sub 50% win rate against many of the decks in Modern. What makes it a decent choice as a whole is the fact that it has 3 major good matchups in the format currently. It is favored results-wise, at least, over the past month through online tournaments and major reported paper tournaments, over Boros Energy, Amulet Titan, and Prowess. These 3 decks are, especially lately, the most played decks in the format. This makes Goryos a contender to be a top 8 deck at any major tournament. Eldrazi Tron has had an interesting curve over this year. There was a time it was splashing to keep green pieces in World Breaker and sowing Mycospawn, which allowed the deck to deny opponents mana while also ramping to possible missing Tron pieces. It then pivoted to being more of a pure colorless list, other than Dismember focusing on having Glaring Fleshraker, the 3-drop that we all wished would replace Matter Reshaper, and Eldrazi Classic Thought-Knot Seer, as the early backbone to then later follow up with Sire 7 Deaths, Ugin Eye of the Storms, and Devourer of Destiny. Of course, one cannot forget Karn the Great Creator, as it provides the deck with one-shot answers out of the sideboard. The deck was one of the most played decks up to the Pro Tour, and then was the 4th most played deck at Pro Tour Edge of Eternities. After this, however, the deck has seen a bit of a drop-off. Probably the most concerning point for the deck currently is that it has a rough go into Amulet Titan and Boros Energy. And to be honest, calling it a rough go against Titan is underselling how bad that matchup is. One can say that Eldrazi Tron can improve its matchup into Boros Energy pretty easily by playing more copies of All Is Dust and Sire of 7 Deaths, but the deck currently is built to try and land its haymakers quickly, while having enough disruption for the combo decks so that it's not completely run over. The deck has mostly abandoned playing its old staple 4 of Chalice of the Void, simply because it doesn't stop or disrupt combo decks like it used to, and Karn may still be strong, but even it doesn't hit the Affinity matchup like it used to, now that Affinity can run a Kappa Cannoneer out early and then hold up Metallic Rebuke for a Tron player's Karn. Turn 3 Tron will still be a floor in the format that other decks will have to compare itself to, but in some ways the deck is just lying in wait for cards to get printed in the future to see what it can take advantage of as the meta shifts. We have reached the interesting point where Boros Energy is the fair deck in the format. I honestly had not thought that this would eventually be the case simply because the deck has 2 incredibly powerful interactions. Guide of Souls and Ocelot Pride, which in turn have spawned other decks such as Azorius Blink and Soul Sister variants, and of course Ajani plus Goblin Bombardment. As we know, when you have Ajani and Bombardment out, you can sack the token created by Ajani to the Bombardment to immediately flip the Ajani to its Planeswalker side. That is an incredibly difficult thing to deal with and tends to win the game by itself. Let us also not forget that if you deal with their board, Phlage becomes more and more an inevitable threat both as a removal spell and then as a win condition that tends to be hasted out from the graveyard through Arena of Glory being exerted. Enough combo decks now, though, have started packing efficient sweepers and instant speed interaction that the deck sometimes just doesn't do enough facing down an instant win. In some ways, the deck just has a strong enough spine that it is the new, and I know some will hate me saying this as it is almost cliche at this point, Jund of the format. The deck in comparison to everything else that is currently played is almost just too fair. The deck is going to just be there, and if you don't have a plan for it, Boros Energy will beat you. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Belcher Combo, just even a month ago, was considered to be the sleeping giant of the format. Pros and others agreed that it was the most powerful deck that at the time was not being represented properly in the meta before Pro Tour Edge of Eternities. It became the second most played deck at that Pro Tour, and even took down the tournament. Though oddly enough, it had a sub 50% winning percentage for that weekend. It is undeniable that the deck has good interaction, being able to utilize cards such as Force of Negation and Flare of Denial effectively. It also is a fact that the deck still has an instant win button with Goblin Charbelcher, thanks to being a list that is not running any basic lands or lands that are not modal double-face cards. Add Tamashi, Lotus Bloom, and War of Invention, and the deck can do a great job of digging for Charbelcher and leaving up mana to activate it, or in the case of Whir, wait till the opponent's end step to search for the Goblin Charbelcher. I think moving forward, this deck is still being slept on. However, there is enough things that are stopping it from being an effective strategy that it may not put up results for a little bit and will eventually be one of the better decks in the format again once the RCQ season comes around. Simic Birthing Ritual, which almost sounds like a Ravnican prenatal guidebook, is one of the most interesting recent inclusions into the meta in a long while. Birthing Ritual is a card that breathes value, and when you have cards that feed into that breath, such as Shardless Agent, Icefang Quotal, Fibblethip the Lost, and Coiling Oracle, you can easily find your cards that can interact with your opponent and eventually overwhelm them to win the game. Birthing Ritual can turn these cards into Endurance, Subtlety, and most importantly, Abhorrent Oculus. Ritual lets you cheat out Oculus by sacking a 2 CMC creature into a 3 CMC creature. Of course, the deck also has many interactive pieces that make it difficult to deal with. Flare of Denial, Subtlety, Force of Negation, and Endurance all help the deck keep the opponent at bay while gaining consistent incremental value. The value of your early creatures are inherently good at creating opportunities for you to use cards that interact with your opponent, and all this value of drawing cards, creating multiple threats with Abhorrent Oculus, really just makes the deck overwhelm the opponent. Of course, as WotC prints more threats that are blue and green that have great value when they enter the battlefield, the better this deck will get, and it will continue to be a good choice in the meta. What hasn't been said about Izzet Prowess? The deck really hasn't seen any new pieces since it started putting up really good results in early 2025. The deck has one of the fastest starts a deck can have in the format when it comes to playing a Prowess creature and then playing a Lava Dart, Mutagenic Growth, Violent Urge, and other cards that trigger Prowess. Its most explosive hands, though, are when it plots Slick Shot Show Off, and when the opponent is not ready for it, specifically when they are tapped out, cast all of these 1 mana and essentially 0 mana spells to give multiple Prowess triggers to the Slick Shot Show Off. Of course, the deck is running multi-format all-star Corey Steelcutter and Dragon Rage's Channeler, and add options such as Preordain and Expressive Iteration. The deck has many ways to be able to find the cards it needs to combo off, essentially, and kill the opponent. The deck is the burn deck of the format, has managed to put a top 8 in the Pro Tour of Edge of Eternities, and has seen some top 8 results as well, including top 32 performances in RC Houston and the Regional Championship in Australia. This deck is definitely a great choice moving forward, as it has the speed to compete with anything else in the Modern format, and if you're just starting, is a relatively cheap deck to throw together, with most of the pieces being under $500 in total, including the mana base. Here are the boom-bust decks of the format. There are 3 decks that fit this category in my opinion, despite none of them playing the card boom-bust. Dredge, Ruby Storm, and Neoform Combo are all-in combo decks that take advantage of moments where opponents do not have the right interaction to deal with the combo. Ruby Storm made the incredible run down at the recent Regional Championship in Australia, taking down the whole event. Most of us see Ruby Storm as an all-in strategy, but as of late they have diversified their mana base so that Prismatic Ending and Orym's Chant can be great wish targets and sideboard pieces to get rid of your opponent's threats, or to generally stop your opponent from interacting with what you are doing. The deck relies on 2 pieces that came with Modern Horizons 3. These are Ral, Monsoon Sage, and Ruby Medallion, which cheapen all of your red spells. You can then, with the power of rituals to net mana and impulses to continue getting access to cards, get past In Flames and eventually have cast enough spells to cast Wish, to find Grapeshot, or just find it in the main deck. Flipping Ral to its Planeswalker side also does a great job of finding your missing piece. Enough other combo decks are having to be thought about in the sideboards of players currently that when played well, this deck can really go on a run. Simic Neoform Combo is a list that a surprising number of pros brought to the Pro Tour, around 4.8% of the field, and even put a copy into the top 8 of the tournament. The list has something most pros like for a tournament, which is an instant win button, and sometimes that can be done as early as turn 2, though past iterations could even win the game earlier. It also was able to hold up Consigned Memory and Pact of Negation to help protect the combo. The easiest way to combo here is to get Allosaurus Rider out on turn 2, and Neoform into either Griselbrand, Atraxa, or if you have a number of these cards stuck in hand, Galta Stampede Tyrant, which lets you put creatures from your hand onto the battlefield. All of these creatures are difficult to remove. The fun part about Consign here is that if you have to protect your combo with Pact of Negation, or had to grab the Rider with Summoner's Pact, it can counter the you lose the game trigger from both of these cards. This does make the list resilient. However, the deck has a certain amount of a fail rate, and if your opponents know what you are doing and are packing some simple hate cards, the deck can stumble, which showed with its win rate at the Pro Tour being under 50%, and how other combo lists have become more favorable at recent tournaments. Probably one of the neatest decks to pop up in a minute has been the resurgence of Dredge. While we haven't seen it do much besides win a challenge or 2, the innovations in the list are definitely worth noting. Artist Talent has been a great addition to the list, and the choice of playing 4 copies of Arclight Phoenix gives this list a faster way to win over the top of some of the creature lists such as Boros Energy. In some ways, you can even call this list a burn deck. You still see copies of Creeping Chill, which is at least 12 damage over the course of a game. Lava Dart is also here to deal with an Ocelot Pride or 2, but most importantly can go upstairs to the face, and with its flashback cost, lets you hit the number of spells needed to cast in a turn to trigger your Phoenixes. If this and your opponent's fetch lands weren't enough to get the win, there is also a copy of Conflagrate in the list. If you are playing the long game, Artist Talent's 3rd level will get in extra damage as well. While the list is still weak to good graveyard hate, this version of Dredge could be around for a while, now that it has adopted these new cards and is adapted to the new meta. In conclusion, there's been a lot of changes this year in the Modern format, and funny enough, it's in the best place it's been in years. Ever since Underworld Breach and Nadu Winged Wisdom have been banned, the format has had so much new life with the new cards that have been brought in, and for the most part, I think it comes down to one simple thing. People get to do their broken stuff, and there are answers that are efficient enough to stop them from doing what they want to do that's broken. This leads to more fun Magic, and lets the player feel like they have enough agency to be able to deal with what their opponent is doing. To top this off, most of the decks that are combos are winning in fast enough ways that it doesn't feel like you're just sitting there watching your opponent play solitaire with themselves, and that's a good thing. People can actually win, and for the most part, there's a lot of creatures attacking into each opponent. Hopefully, Wizards of the Coast can take this as a sign that they should really apply this logic to other formats, and hopefully we will see more fun Magic here in the future. Thank you so much for watching us here at MTG Scoundrels, and we will see you all next week.